In the early 1980s, a young boy, no older than 6 or 7, stood on the corner of Tragedy Road and St. Vincent Street, only a few steps from his front door, watching Mass during Trinidad Carnival. The sun was hot. The air was filled with a cacophony of music, along with people singing and shouting over the noise to try to talk to each other. The air smelled sweet with the scent of oranges peeled on a spiral device by a nearby vendor. The boy, shorter than everyone around him, looked up at the masqueraders as they chipped by, arms in the air, swaying to the music. And then suddenly, as if casting an all-encompassing cinematic shadow over him, a giant mechanical crab filled his field of vision. It was as beautiful as it was grotesque. The bipedal support of the masquerader leading up into multiple large mechanical arms with claws or gundies turned upward. Its face, planted squarely among the ornate metal accoutrement, looked like an even darker version of the mask worn by Lord Humongous in the Mad Max film The Road Warrior. 4 long poles extended high into the air from its metallic carapace, each anchor in the corner of a billowing white sheet stained with blood-colored dye. The boy had seen this same creature on TV a couple nights before. He'd watched in horror and gleeful fascination as Man Crab, the king costume for Peter Menschel's carnival presentation for that year, glided over the main stage as that same blood flowed onto the sheet, destroying its own purity on live television while a stunned nation watched on. The boy didn't understand any of it. He didn't understand the symbolism of Man Crab, the fact that he embodied the corruption of man through consumerism and technology, or the fact that he stood diametrically opposed to the purity of self and the collective of our nation. The boy had no idea that Man Crab was a character in a story that unfolded over 3 years and changed Carnival in Trinidad forever. All he knew was that what he was looking at was amazing. And now, looking up at it in person, in all its macabre yet elegant majesty, the boy was mesmerized and terrified. That, as the kids say, was a core memory for me. I'm sure that over the years I've added in the kinds of flourishes our minds layer into these kinds of memories that stay with us for our entire lives. But the simple truth of it is that I saw Man Crab in the proverbial flesh, and it left an indelible mark on me as a creative. Almost 5 decades later, after spending my entire adult life abroad, I began this journey of discovery and rediscovery that led me back to spectator mass, which is short for masquerading, and the concept of telling stories through carnival bands. I revisited the themes and concepts that Minshall put on display during the trilogy, a multi-year saga that dealt with a major inflection point for our country, both economically and culturally. And he and his collaborators used their band to take Calypso's tradition of social commentary and extrapolate that into a dark, brooding meditation on themes such as greed, avarice, materialism, and even the ever-present threat of nuclear extinction, and presented it with a delectable crust of bright colors and flowing form. He understood that Carnival, in many ways, was and still is a living, breathing canvas. He told stories using the movement of the masqueraders themselves. Each of them were on their own individual Carnival journeys, but collectively, they made up the personification of performance art on a grand scale, an approach that he eventually took to the global stage as the artistic director for the opening ceremonies of 3 Olympic Games: Barcelona in 1992, Atlanta in 1996, and Salt Lake City in 2002. The trilogy sparked national conversation. Many embraced it. Others were opposed to him using mass in such a deliberate and pointed way. but everyone talked about it. And he, along with other band leaders such as Edwin and Lil Hart, Wayne Barkley, and Raul Garin, reshaped the portrayal of mass on a grand stage in the 80s and 90s. Themes and characters such as Rat Race, Saga Boy and Tantan, Callaloo dancing tic-tac-toe, Islands in the Sun, The Sting, and The Midnight Robber all entered or re-entered Trinidad's collective consciousness. Names like Carol Acquis, Alison Brown, and the eponymous Peter Samuel became part of our zeitgeist, with their echoes and even direct involvement still being felt today. These men and women pushed Carnival into a new space, one that has evolved over the subsequent decades into the ongoing global force that it is today in terms of pageantry and spectacle. But with evolution comes change, and now, decades later, spectator mass has once again retreated into the smaller corners of the greatest show on earth. But it's still alive, and many of these legends are still involved today. As for me, my reintroduction to this world started with a simple WhatsApp message to Kevin Crosby, who was part of the leadership team of Kinetic Mass. I'd planned a trip back home that happened to coincide with Carnival, and long story short, I ended up playing Mass on Monday and Tuesday, which I recounted in my last episode. This episode is a companion piece to that one, where I took the opportunity to sit down with Kevin after all of the dust settled on Carnival 2026 to talk about the current state of Mass and spectator Mass and what it takes to put together an annual Carnival band presentation and the sheer scope of the collective effort across our nation that goes into making Carnival happen. Kevin and I became best friends in high school, and it was an unexpected treat to sit with him to talk shop, compare our approaches to working in a creative space, and discuss why our culture and the work that we do to help move it forward is vitally important to us. Hello and welcome back to the Freshwater Yankee podcast. As always, my name is Wendell Riley, and I am doing a special follow-up episode to the one that we published at the end of February 2026. That was the 2026 Carnival Potential to Kinetic Energy. I'm actually quite proud of that name. And so today, as a follow-up, I have a really special guest on with us, Kevin Crosby, who's my best friend from growing up here in Trinidad and Tobago. We actually went to the same college in Baltimore, Maryland. We went to Morgan State University together. You were ahead of me, I think, by 2 years or something like that, or 1 year. By 1 year, and then you decided to come back to Trinidad. You left me up there in the States. But you have always been involved in Carnival and the sort of the music industry in Trinidad and Tobago. So tell us a little bit about who you are and sort of your journey in the music world in Trinidad.
Hi, everyone. As Wendell said, my name is Kevin. I am part of a music family, yes. I wouldn't say that I am part of the music industry. So my father, my late father, was executive producer in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s for a lot of calypso and soca artists. So I would have grown up in and around the industry in that capacity. In the recording studios out on the road doing distributions and so forth, and in a couple of the promotional events that we would have had or the family would have had within the carnival season to promote the musical products for the specific year.
And of course, you are very modest, immediately kind of downplaying your role. But you have been really involved in the Crosby family business since you were young. You know, some of my earliest memories of Carnival is like being on the music trucks, going over to Maracas on Ash Wednesday for the last lap kind of scenes or the warm. I forget what they used to call it.
Yeah, the cool down.
The cool down, the cool down. But no, you. Every time I mention like a soca artist growing up, you'd be like, oh yeah, that's my uncle or that's my aunt, and you have really kind of taken on one part of your dad's legacy with Kinetic Mass, right? And I don't want to misstate anything, so tell us a little bit about Kinetic Mass and your involvement in it.
So, Kinetic is a project that we've been in existence since 2019. It's actually an amalgamation of two or three band leaders. So, you're right. My late father and his partner at the time, and me Placid, would have had a band, just we and friends. We're now in partnership with Peter Samuel, known as the Carnival King of Trinidad and Tobago. He has had a couple of bands. We had the late Jerry Weeks, who's also been a band leader. We have a couple of other stakeholders within the band, so JC De Freitas, Richard Commission, Ronald Guy James. Now, Ronald Guy James is responsible for production and so forth of the band, but he, along with Peter Menchel and Jerry Weeks, would have had history going all the way back to Minchel's production company. So in 2019, we all came together and we decided to form this entity to bring back costuming into Trinidad and Tobago Carnival. We launched in 2019. Our first presentation was in 2020. We won Band of the Year with a production called Spectator, which was designed by Peter Minchell at that point in time. We've gone on to win Medium Band of the Year in Port of Spain. We've placed second a couple of times, so we're bouncing around between first and second. But all in all, we've been a successful creative entity in the traditional mass and costuming space.
And so, just like some of the names you mentioned, they're like true luminaries in Carnival. Like, if you know Carnival in Trinidad and Tobago, you hear the name Peter Minchel. I mean, even when I was a kid, I remember seeing some of the costumes that he put together. Like Man Crab was one of the like core memories that I have of watching Mass, standing up on Tragedy Road, watching the band go by and seeing the Man Crab costume pass by, and that was really, really special for me. So just the idea of you working with these guys and talking about it in such a blasé way should give the audience sort of an idea of where you are in terms of your role in Carnival, but also give some context for our listeners. Carnival has been evolving over the years, right? And Carnival started off as, we had very specific costume types like Sailor Mask and things like that. And then it sort of evolved into these presentations, these very artful presentations with guys like Peter Minchel doing it on a large scale, these big bands. And of course that went on, like Peter Minchel went on to have like international prominence doing work for, was it the Olympics, I believe? He did
Correct.
one of the Olympic opening ceremonies. And so while that is a core part of Carnival history, we have also had this evolution away from that, where we have larger bands now that emphasize more what we call beads and bikinis. I don't know if that's a good way to categorize it. Whereas, it's a lot less about the artistry and the pageantry and more about just the act of playing.
Yeah, so locally we call it bikini and beads. We at Kinetic like to differentiate between participative mass and spectator mass. So we are on the side of spectator mass, where our masqueraders don costumes and so forth that portray a theme that stands out.
Right.
Not to say that those on the other side, in terms of participative mass, don't do the same, but they do it more with the masqueraders and masqueraders' satisfaction and their experience in mind.
So for them it's more about the act of playing and less about what you are actually showing as a
portrait,
right? Yeah.
Portrait, yes.
Yeah. So that is a very important distinction, because there's sort of a schism between the two. And, I try to think positively, and I think there's a place for both kinds of mass in Trinidad and Tobago. But I think unfortunately some of the older types of masks and those big costumes and costumes that are designed for movement as well as form, those things are less and less prominent in Carnival today, right?
Yes, yes. So it is an art form that is on the decline. Funny that you mentioned movement and so forth. When we were coming up with the name Kinetic, it was really and truly chosen to actually display the type of art
Right.
or to depict what we try to produce. And more persons now gravitate towards the bikini and beads in this cycle.
Yeah. Yeah.
So everything is cyclical.
Sure.
So hopefully we go through the cycle again and you see more spectator mass becoming prominent.
Yeah. So why is it important for you personally to help continue having spectator mass be sort of a stalwart of Trinidad and Tobago Carnival?
There are a lot of reasons. Firstly enough, honoring my late father's memory
Yeah.
by carrying on his legacy. I'm also going back to a child standing on the corner of the Queen's Park Savannah and watching presentations like Rat Race and so forth.
Yeah. Oh
And
yeah.
those things are ingrained in my mind and motivated to keep that alive.
Yeah.
Just putting myself in the shoes of young impressionable child, 8 years old, 9 years
Yeah.
old. That will always be a motivator for me.
Yeah, that's a big deal. I mean, again, seeing those huge, not just the huge costumes, but also like the actual sections of those old bands, they really do have an important role in how we view the world as Trinidadians creatively, but also how we express ourselves and how we present to the world, right? And so I know a lot of people come to Trinidad for bikini and beads and stuff like that, but spectator mass really was a core part of Carnival for us,
Correct.
and there was it was spectacular and it was spectacle, and I think that is something that the fact that you feel committed to keeping that alive is a really special thing.
Thanks.
And even for me as a masquerader, right? So I played in the big bands, Poison and Tribe and all of that. This was really my first time outside of like when I played Kiddies Carnival as a child. This was really the first time where I played that spectator mass, where I had and I remember like my parents, like my mom playing spectator mass with big costumes and stuff like that. But this was a whole thing. Like I had, pants and a chest piece and all of that and a headpiece. But then I also had the wings. Yeah, so the backpack essentially. And I had to essentially lug that around for 2 days. But there's kind of a magical thing where you don't feel the weight after a while because you feel so amazing wearing this costume and seeing people looking and taking pictures with their phones and videos when we go by and knowing that this is sort of like not as common as it used to be. So when you pass by in these kinds of costumes, like people really pay attention and they sort of look at like, what is the story you all are trying to tell? So what is your role in Kinetic?
So I am on the management team of Kinetic Mass. My role specifically, I would like to think it's more the logistical side and on the business side. With all carnival companies, there's a creative side and a business.
Sure, yeah.
If you ask me, I stay out of the lane of the creatives and I see about the business and the logistics side. That's what I think I would like to do.
Yeah.
Of course, you've seen me in action and I tend to dabble in everything.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, but so my role primarily is supposed to be along the lines of management with respect to sourcing of materials when necessary.
Yeah.
Especially materials that we source from abroad, be it the North American market or We go as far as China
Wow.
to
Yeah.
source some of the raw materials. So it's doing that more or less, and then looking after the business side of things. So come the end of the season, we're in the black as opposed to being in the red.
Right. And then of course on, and I will go ahead and talk about like my just kind of watching you as you mentioned on Carnival Monday and Tuesday, you were basically involved in every aspect and just kind of monitoring and making sure that everything was going well, but also making key decisions on the fly because this is a very organic thing. You have an entity with about 300 people when you add the masqueraders and the people who support the band and stuff like that, and you kind of have you're one of the people who make key decisions about how things go on Monday and Tuesday, right?
Yes, so the management team collectively, we're always on parade days, scanning the scene and making decisions.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a lot going on that masqueraders may not know that is going on.
Absolutely.
So coordination of meals coming to the band and so forth, the bar, so security issues, all of these things happen in the background, hopefully seamlessly.
And even like what route you're going to take, because you don't always know what's gonna happen along the route. You might run into another band or a roadblock or something like that, and you have to make decisions on the fly.
Yeah, so we have a team separate and apart from myself. That's their responsibility. They coordinate with the National Carnival Commission and check congestion on the route and so forth before making that decision. Sometimes, yes, we make calls off the top of our heads, and on one or two occasions, I've had to do that. But generally, there's an entity within the band that does that.
Yeah, and so just to sort of paint the picture of what we're talking about. So over 2 days, Carnival Monday and Tuesday, you have many, many different bands of different sizes. So at any one point in the day, you have tens of thousands of masqueraders on the road in the capital of Trinidad and Tobago, all moving either in the same direction or sort of cross-cutting and stuff like that. And so really it is like this big, long parade made up of smaller disparate parts. And you have talked about how one of the conversations we had was how Carnival is a logistical miracle, right? It really shows not only the artistry of us as a people, but also our ability to coordinate something on such a massive scale. I mean, tens of thousands of people over 2 days, and there's coordination across the board to make this work.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, Carnival, from my perspective, through the lens of project managers and so forth, is a mega project that you have multiple entities pulling this off within a definitive time frame. There's nothing like we miss Carnival Monday and Tuesday, so we'll come on the road Ash Wednesday.
Right, because literally everything ends on Carnival Tuesday at Ash Wednesday. Other than a few like last lap parties or cool downs or whatever.
Life returns to normal.
Right, life goes back to normal. Yeah, and because Trinidad effectively shuts down on Monday and Tuesday. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I know you don't want to give yourself credit, but it's sort of the same thing I do when I'm producing. My philosophy as a producer is to give creatives the opportunity to do what they do best and remove obstacles from their path.
That's it.
At any given point. And if I do that, that's a good day. I go home and I sleep well. But it also means that you have to help manage creatives as well, because creatives need a lot of support in different ways. It is a massive role, because again, having stuff that looks great is one thing, but if there was not that logistical machine behind it, then it would just be chaos. And Carnival runs smoothly. I mean, even though you have like complaints and stuff like that along the way, things that don't go as well, but it is a very, and we've been doing it for decades and decades in this country.
Yeah. So that's the goal, to deliver customer experience to our masqueraders that seems seamless. I think, as you rightly said, we've been doing it for quite a while, and we've evolved and polished the product across the board.
Yeah.
There aren't many bands that you go to that you will walk away disgusted. You should get what you pay for from the majority of bands in terms of the costume that you paid for,
Yeah.
the experience on the road with respect to refreshments and entertainment. There are add-ons like the goodie bags and so forth that some entities now have introduced into their carnival product. But at a base level, each masquerader is paying for a costume and road experience in terms of Monday and Tuesday. So seamless road experience in terms of refreshments, utilities such as washrooms and so forth, security.
Yeah.
So we tend to provide that for all our masqueraders. So when you speak about management of creatives and so forth, that in a big part redounds to the team that surrounds the creatives.
Sure. Yeah.
And we tend to have a team of creatives that have been working together. Well, in our case, it's about 6 years officially in this format, but the circle is small. So everybody,
Right.
we like to say we have about 200 years experience in mass production.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
When you put together everyone's experience, everyone knows everyone and so forth. So this team that we have producing mass on behalf of Kinetic now, they're quite comfortable. They've known each other. They're working with each other for years. So separate and apart from minor issues that come up day to day life as humans, it runs pretty smoothly.
Yeah.
Yes, you may have creative differences and so forth, but we are professional enough to put aside, to identify what is best for the masquerade and put aside feelings and human emotion and so forth.
And that requires trust, right? You have to trust that everybody is looking in the same direction. And I will say, I mean, the fact that Kinetic in its existence is always first or second proves that you all are doing something right. And the product that you put out, for me personally as a masquerader, but also somebody stepping back and looking at how gorgeous the presentation was this year, and I know what the presentations looked like in prior years as well. So I think that's a testament, like you said, to the strength of your team. So I want to just take a quick step back. So again, from the perspective of the masquerader, so if you were, say, somebody in the US and you wanted to play mass, and you go to the website, right? You would pick your section, order your costume, that kind of thing. And then on the day, you talked about having the amenities available on the road with you at all times. So at any point over the course of 2 days, you have access, or we as masqueraders, we have access to bathrooms, we have access to drinks and snacks. On Tuesday, we have food. There are also maxi taxis or passenger vans with air conditioning. So if you get too hot, you could go sit down. And then
security as well as medical team within the band.
Right.
In case of any emergency.
And then you have concierges throughout the band as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we could never forget the music trucks, and you have DJs, and you have hype men and all that. So how many people would you say your entire team consists of when you add in all of the folks who come in and like even just work on Monday and Tuesday?
The contingent is in the vicinity of 75%
Wow.
support staff.
Wow.
And that's, as you say, security, musicians, DJs, truck drivers, medics, the whole shebang, 75%.
Yeah, because really the goal is to have no masquerader having a bad experience, right? You like one person maybe falling out of the band somehow with illness or something like that. That's one too many, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
And so you're always like vigilant. And the thing about it is I go back to like my producing. When I say producing is like watching special effects in a movie. If you at any point realize that you are watching a visual effect, you're sort of taken out of it. So the best VFX are the ones that you don't see and you don't think about. And I imagine that's kind of the same thing for you, right?
Correct. So yes, so we try to, which as we say, our goal is to leave the starting point with everyone and bring everyone back to the starting point at the end of Carnival Tuesday, safe and intact.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, listen, I for one appreciate that because it is quite a journey, both spiritually but physically as well. I want to also talk about the annual cycle of this because obviously this is something that requires a lot of planning. So could you talk a little bit about like when you start planning for Carnival, the next Carnival? This is a
Sure.
loaded question. I know the answer.
Yeah, so Carnival, next Carnival's planning started probably about 4 months ago. So in each Carnival season, there's a design cycle where the designer will pick the theme and he will present costumes that depict the theme, presents it to the management team, and he either gets a green light or he goes back to do some rework. After that, the process moves to the production, to the prototyping stage, where the designers' costume depictions move from a two-dimensional design on paper, and it is produced as a three-dimensional prototype by our head of production.
Right.
So in that phase, you're choosing materials and so forth and thinking what is the most economical way to produce this band given the effect that the designer is trying to achieve on the road Carnival Monday and Tuesday.
Yeah.
So that's where the compromise and so forth comes in between the design team and the production team.
Right.
After that, we go into the sales period where we present everything to the masqueraders and have them sign up. And then
So that's the launch.
that's the band launch, which normally occurs July, August, thereabouts.
So so the design and prototyping phase sort of runs, maybe before the current carnival and then into
yeah, realistically, we take about a month off to try and re-energize between carnival seasons.
Yeah, and also reassess from what you did last year, right?
Correct. So realistically, it would start in March, mid-March.
Yeah.
And then we go all the way to June, July before we launch the next year's theme to the general public.
Right.
And that's, as you say, via band launch.
Yeah.
We'll present everything.
Yeah.
After that phase is where masqueraders are welcome to sign up and so forth. So the websites, the band room and so forth is open to take subscriptions.
Right.
And then we move into production phases. And that's where the gamble comes in. So not every time we can wait or we can hold back the production cycle and wait for masqueraders to know their size and so forth. So the science comes in there where we say, all right, this is the demographic that we've been working with. There's the bell curve and normal distribution and so forth.
Wow.
And we produce costumes like that.
So you'll use analytics for this process essentially.
Sure, yeah, that's my bread and butter.
Right.
Outside of carnival season.
Right.
So I tend to apply it based on what we've had over the years.
Yeah.
And even though I have the science behind it, the rest of the production team, they may not refer to it as a normal distribution as if they very well know.
Right. There's sort of an innate knowledge base. Yeah.
Correct. So that's the production cycle. Along with the production cycle is where you have the business side of the band reaching out to sponsors and so forth, trying to negotiate and lock down agreements for the next season. And then by the time we turn around to Christmas and so forth, we're getting prepared for distribution mode, and that we are winding up the production phase, packaging costumes and so forth, and then looking to the road experience in terms of getting service providers on the same page and so forth.
Right. Well, so before we talk about the road experience, I want to talk about the production phase because this is sort of the nitty-gritty of it, right? Where you literally have to mass produce costumes, and these are all there's some I'm sure there's some machine fabrication, but for you all do a lot of it by hand, right? Could you talk about that process a little bit?
Right. So In the production phase, we have two main teams. We have the production team led by Ronald Guy James that does the sewing and so forth. There's also another team led by a guy called Courtney Reid out of Toronto. And his team of folks, they do the headpieces, the backpacks, and so forth.
Yeah.
So those two, and that's, I tend to refer to them as more the engineering team. So
Right.
they have to produce items that may stand up for 2 days
Right.
for the masqueraders. In the case of the king and the queen and the individuals, they have to run a bit longer than that.
Yeah.
So those guys are the guys that have engineering eyes and so forth.
Yeah.
And they put that together. So as I said, we have two teams. One team working the putting together the sewing and this and that, and then you have the team fitting together the backpacks, the headpieces, and so forth.
Right.
And as with anything else, there's constant communication between the both teams.
Sure.
And then when you throw the design into the mix, those three have to get everything done.
Right. And you are talking about mass producing costumes for people of all shapes, sizes, heights, that kind of thing.
Exactly.
You obviously have different categories of sizes, but these costumes have to be made in a way that it doesn't matter what your body type is on the day. It needs to be able to be functional, meaning you should be able to put it on, it will fit, and you can move with it for 2 days on the road.
That's correct. So with everything else, we have outliers. So we may have extremely short persons that don't fit.
Yeah.
And we have to customize their costumes. This year we use a lot of capes. So we would have to cut the cape shorter for shorter persons.
Right.
We have some plus size people in the band, and of course we have to produce the suit.
Yeah.
But all in all, yes, everything is taken into consideration, and once the masquerader identifies their needs, we tend to produce the suit.
Right. So yeah, this is like a real big thing, and so and you are one of how many medium and large bands would you say there are, if you had to guess, in Trinidad for the carnival season?
I would say in the large category in Port of Spain, there may be say about 8 to 10 bands.
Right.
And now these are all bands with subscriptions of 3,000 plus people.
Wow.
I mean, a large category is anything above 800.
Right.
I stipulated by the rules, the National Carnival Commission rules. But when you look at the mega bands, they cater for 3,000.
3,000 and more. That's kind of on the low end, right?
That's on the low end.
Yeah. So again, so you have these entities, all of these organizations, basically companies, right? That this is what you do throughout the year. So there's an annual cycle. This is not something you'll start working on in November.
No. I think mass has evolved now to a year of activities.
Yeah.
Within the medium band category, I would say there are 15 to 20.
Okay.
These are anywhere between 200 and 600, 800 masqueraders.
Okay.
Then there are small categories, small bands, and a lot of those.
Just quite, yeah. I don't think anybody has a count on that. Those are probably a little more organic.
Yeah, well, you have small and then you have mini. The mini are organic. 2 or 3 people come together and they do it.
Okay.
So Carnival is still at the end of the day in and out the people. So if you as a single entity wants to produce your own costume and come on the road, you're free to do so.
You can register
can register.
Wow. Yeah.
You may not have a music truck for you or a bar, but
right.
You're free to do so, because at all the judging points, there's music. They're equipped with music for you to cross the stage and be judged just as any of the large bands.
Okay, so like those Blue Devils that were ahead of us, they didn't have music or anything like that, but they crossed the stage you know,
Exactly.
yeah, and they had music playing and all of that.
Yeah, and I saw 10 votes.
Yeah, and so you could actually be, and you could be judged in that category if you choose to.
Correct. Whenever you register.
Wow, wow, that's fantastic. So I want to take a step back and talk a little bit about kings and queens because that's a big thing. Because there's a separate judging category for that. There's a separate competition for that. It's not just on the road. And I've always been curious as to like what the conversations are that go into a king and a queen costume. And a king costume could be, these things are like sometimes 10 feet, 20 feet in the air, sometimes 20 feet wide, and but I'm sure there are actual limits on what your kings. I don't know. Tell me a little bit about kings and queens.
Well, so kings and queens, in terms of dimensions, the stage has a specific dimension. So I guess you're limited by that, but
Yeah,
really and truly anything goes.
yeah, yeah.
One and that so the king and queen competition. So each band is allotted two representatives
Okay,
in the senior category for king and queen.
right,
This year, on the male side, I believe there was 60 something entrants,
right.
69 or so. And on the female side, about 60 as well.
Yeah,
So these costumes are probably the most elaborate costumes you will see.
yeah,
As you say, some of them may be 20 feet in the air, 30 feet wide.
yeah.
Some of them may make it on the parade route on Carnival Monday and Tuesday. Some may not, just because of the sheer size of it.
Right.
They
Power
just can't.
lines
Power
and
lines
the
are
width of the road itself.
exactly.
Yeah.
So electrical company has deemed that they will guarantee that power lines don't drop it below 18 feet.
Right. Okay.
So you have that to play with, and just the width of the road, yes,
Yeah.
sometimes may not facilitate a 30-foot structure coming through.
Right.
Some costumes can be dismantled, so a piece of the costumes can
Right.
be through, but a lot of them, they're just too large to go
Yeah.
on.
These are so heavy. They're typically on wheels, right? And
The majority on wheels now. There are some that are still carried on the backs of masqueraders.
wow.
But yeah, the majority of them are on boats. The competition itself, you are judged in various categories. So they have creative, topical, you have a myriad of other categories
Right.
that you can be judged in. And the panel will judge you. You go through a preliminary round and a semi-final round, and then a final round. So we start with 60, then we commit to 20, then you come to the final round, which is the top 10.
Right.
They compete for senior king and queen of the bands. The carnival.
Yeah, and that competition is essentially like a showcase where they come up onto the stage and the masquerader that is pulling it or wearing it, they move around the stage. So the way the king and queen costume moves is a big deal, of course. The way it looks, the way it turns. But also there's a bit of pageantry based on the skill of the masquerader themselves, right? They have people who like that is their specialty. They play
Portray
in
mass, yes.
yeah.
So there's a judging criteria called the spirit of carnival, which I guess that is, from my perspective, it's hard to
Yeah.
define.
Yeah.
I'm sure these judges have the criteria defined, but I tend to say that je ne sais quoi, an ability to portray the mass
Yeah.
itself is where you'll be adjudged.
Right. And that's big. I mean, obviously there are prizes to be won, but there's also like bragging rights, right? Because I imagine winning like band of the year or winning your king and queen winning means that increases the popularity of your band and allows you to attract more people the following year.
Sure. Yeah. So, yeah, everyone starts off with, well, the majority of persons start off with that in mind in terms of an entrance into the king and queen competition, or an entry into the carnival band parade competition. It's not a single driver,
Right.
but it is one of the elements that those that are involved in producing mass use to energize their efforts.
Right. And again, this is a visual medium, so you want it to be well received, you want it to be celebrated, you want it to be seen by as many people as possible, and that, as you sort of make your way through these competitions, you get seen by more and more people as a natural part of that process.
Sure, yeah. As perennially, there are certain names that come up and are associated with mass and the kings and queens, and associated with their production teams and so forth. And so you gain notoriety year by year by progressing through these competitions.
Yeah. So these are high stakes, right? Because you have to think about not only the visual story that you're telling as a band, if you are making spectator mass, but also like the safety and the experience of your masqueraders as well, because they are there to have a good time. Your job is to make them look awesome and also ensure that they have the best time possible over the 2-day period.
Correct.
Yeah.
I'd like to think of Kinetic and all other mass bands as event management companies.
Yeah.
So we're managing a mega event over 2 days.
Right.
Preparation is probably 6 to 9 months in advance, but at the end, the event is a 3-day event that we're managing.
Right. That just happens to move constantly.
Just happens to be on the road.
Oh man. Well, listen, Kevin, this has been an absolute pleasure. I don't know if there's anything else you want to touch on, but I will certainly put the links for Kinetic again in the show notes for this, because I really encourage people to go and look at the presentation from this year. You could check out our Facebook page for images from my images that I shot. But you could find this stuff. Just Google Carnival, and I encourage all of you to look at all of the wonderful work that goes into Carnival, because there are many great bands out there. I am biased. I think Kinetic is fantastic, and I hope that I could come back next year and play again.
Sure, always a pleasure to have you in the band. On behalf of the team, myself, Peter, Anne-Marie, GC, Ronald, and Richard, it was a pleasure having you. I also want to say thank you to the creative that is partnering with Kinetic now. That's Sheldon M. Warner.
Yeah.
And he's the guy responsible for all that you saw within the band and on the road in terms of the design concepts. And then our production team, Courtney, Wayne, Ronald, and the rest of the team. Big thanks, and we look forward to being on the road again in 2027. All our masqueraders, thanks for participating and signing up to play with us. And we hope to deliver another unique and, I guess, hassle-free experience in 2027.
I love it. And that's a great way to end. And again, I love the fact that we could have this conversation and talk about it from the logistical standpoint, because in a lot of ways, you have this team of people who are dedicated to this single effort and in service of a group of people who want to just have the best time possible and keep the legacy of spectator mass alive in Trinidad and Tobago. So for that, I applaud you and I applaud your team. And again, I wish Kinetic all the success in the future going forward. Thank you everyone for listening. Again, please check out the show notes. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, and give us a 5-star rating. And as we say in Trinidad, we could talk later. Freshwater Yankee was produced by Jesse Stevenson Riley. Our contributing producers are David McMillan and Lauren Leon McMillan. Music was provided by Peter Sandy of Home Base Productions, and I am your host, Wendell Riley.